What if the biggest obstacle between you and your dream isn't a lack of money, talent, or opportunity, but the belief that you have to face every challenge alone? Before we continue, here's a small request. If you're enjoying this story, please like, follow, and subscribe to stay connected and never miss a new story. The weight one man finally learned to share. Grayson Hale had always believed that success belonged to people who never depended on anyone else. At 27 years old, he lived in the peaceful American town of Cedar Hollow, where he owned a small woodworking shop that had once belonged to his grandfather. The building was old, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and most of his equipment had been repaired so many times that it barely worked anymore. Even so, every morning before sunrise he unlocked the shop with hope in his heart. During the day he repaired broken chairs, old cabinets, worn-out tables, and anything else people brought through his door. The work paid just enough to cover food, rent, electricity, and the endless repairs his workshop constantly needed. No matter how hard he worked, there was never enough money left to move his life forward. Still, Grayson refused to let his circumstances define him. Every evening, after finishing his customers' orders, he stayed behind for hours creating beautiful furniture designs that no one had asked for. He imagined opening a large furniture studio where people from every state would travel just to own one of his handcrafted pieces. He believed quality, patience, and determination would eventually earn him the future he dreamed about. Many people admired his dedication, but others quietly laughed behind his back. They believed a man with an aging workshop and limited resources could never compete with large furniture companies. Grayson heard every doubt, yet he answered none of them. He simply kept working harder. One morning, everything changed. He received an unexpected email from a luxury mountain resort that was preparing to open a collection of premium guest cabins. They wanted an entire set of handcrafted furniture built exclusively by him. The contract included dining tables, bedroom sets, bookshelves, coffee tables, and custom cabinets. It was the largest opportunity he had ever received. The payment promised by the resort was more money than he had earned in several years combined. If he completed the order successfully, he could renovate his workshop, replace every outdated machine, expand his business, and finally build the future he had imagined for so long. Without thinking twice, he accepted the project. At first, everything seemed possible. He carefully measured every piece of wood, planned every design, and worked with excitement from sunrise until late at night. But after only a short time, reality became much harder than he expected. The premium hardwood required for the furniture cost far more than he had estimated. Several of his old power tools broke down in the middle of production, forcing him to spend valuable time repairing them himself. Every unexpected delay pushed the deadline closer. Still, Grayson refused to ask anyone for help. He convinced himself that real success meant finishing every task with his own two hands. As the weeks passed, his life became nothing but work. He often skipped meals because he didn't want to waste time cooking. He survived on coffee and quick snacks while working 18-hour days. His hands became covered with cuts and blisters. His shoulders constantly ached from lifting heavy lumber. Some nights, he became so exhausted that he fell asleep sitting at his workbench before realizing the lights were still on. Even then, he refused to slow down. He believed that resting meant falling behind. One evening, after spending nearly an entire day carving an elegant dining table, disaster struck. As he made the final adjustment, a hidden defect inside the wood caused one side of the table to split completely apart. Weeks of careful work were destroyed in a single second. The loud crack echoed throughout the empty workshop. Grayson stood frozen, staring at the broken table without saying a word. He slowly sat down, lowered his head into his hands, and wondered if his dream had been nothing more than wishful thinking. Even after that heartbreaking setback, he refused to quit. To buy replacement lumber, he made another painful sacrifice by selling the old pickup truck his grandfather had left him. It wasn't just a vehicle. It carried years of memories. But Grayson believed temporary sacrifices were necessary for long-term success. From that day on, he walked several miles to suppliers and back carrying smaller loads of wood because he could no longer afford transportation. The journey was exhausting, yet he kept telling himself that every difficult step brought him closer to his dream. As the final delivery date approached, the pressure became overwhelming. There were still unfinished pieces scattered throughout the workshop, And no matter how fast he worked, there simply weren't enough hours in the day. One afternoon, after pushing himself far beyond his limits, he became dizzy from exhaustion and collapsed onto the workshop floor. When he finally regained consciousness, the room was silent except for the ticking of an old wall clock. Looking around at the unfinished furniture surrounding him, Grayson finally admitted something he had refused to believe for years. Hard work alone could not solve every problem. The next morning, he opened the workshop doors, took a deep breath, and did something he had always considered impossible. He visited several experienced craftsmen in nearby towns whose skills he had respected for years. Instead of pretending everything was under control, he honestly explained his situation and simply asked if they would help him finish the project. To his surprise, every one of them agreed immediately. Some brought professional tools that made the work faster. Others supplied extra lumber they had stored away. Several spent long days sanding, assembling, polishing, and inspecting every piece beside him. For the first time in years, the workshop was no longer silent. It echoed with conversation, shared ideas, laughter, and the satisfying sound of people working together toward the same goal. The impossible task slowly became manageable. Every completed chair, table, cabinet, and bookshelf reminded Grayson that dreams grow stronger when people are willing to support one another. On the evening before the deadline, the final piece received its last coat of finish just as the sun disappeared beyond the mountains. The furniture arrived at the resort exactly on schedule. The owners were amazed by the craftsmanship and attention to detail. They immediately offered Grayson another contract, this time even larger than the first, and recommended his work to several luxury resorts, hotels, and private clients across the country. Within a few years, his small workshop transformed into one of the most respected custom furniture studios in the region. He hired talented craftsmen, trained young apprentices, invested in modern equipment, and created opportunities for many families who once struggled just as he had. But the greatest reward was not the money, the success, or the recognition. It was the lesson he carried for the rest of his life. Whenever someone asked him the secret behind his success, he never spoke about talent, expensive tools, or endless hours of work. Instead, he smiled and said that determination can take a person a long way, but humility carries them even farther. He had learned that no dream becomes smaller when you ask for help. In fact, it becomes stronger because it is supported by trust, kindness, and people who genuinely want to see you succeed. Looking back, Grayson realized that the moment he stopped trying to carry every burden alone was the very moment his life truly began to change. His dream was no longer just a dream. It had become a reality built not only with his own hands, but also with the encouragement, generosity, and support of others. And from that day forward, he made a promise to himself that whenever he saw someone struggling to achieve their own dream, he would be the first person to offer a helping hand, just as others had once done for him. Success is built on hard work, but lasting success comes from having the wisdom to accept help when you need it. Asking for support is not a sign of weakness. It is one of the greatest strengths a person can have. Every dream begins with a single step, but no great journey is meant to be walked alone. The people who truly succeed are not those who never need help. They are the ones who have the courage to accept it, the humility to appreciate it, and the kindness to offer it to others when their own time to give back finally comes. That is how dreams become legacies, and that is how an ordinary life becomes an inspiring story worth remembering for generations. This is the end of the story.